Oh,
If
you're
you
good.
if you hit it, Dave, then it'll go to the cloud, which is what we want.
That's where it's set up.
Yeah. So we are only waiting for, we're not going to wait, but Sam and Emily. JT, is both of you there? You're both on that line?
Right now, yeah, I'm gonna be getting on a separate laptop too, so you'll see both of us separately here in a minute.
That's okay. I don't need to see both. Well, oh, you're right. All right. Anyway,
Just so you know, you are now the host, Devin. So if you get
Okay.
to the separate laptop,
wait,
you're the host.
can I be the co-host so I can share?
Well, you can share now,
Oh,
but you
okay.
can, but I can't do that. Devin has to do that.
Oh, okay. So Devin, make me the host or the co-host or whatever. The only reason we did a host is for somebody like new, like Christina, or somebody who just saw this online and showed up. Um, Let me
All
turn
right,
off
I'm going to
my,
take off. So have a
gotcha.
wonderful
Okay.
class, guys. Enjoy.
Okay.
I'll throw in my last little pitch for the Shalom dinner tomorrow night at
Yep.
Napoli's downtown at 19th and Central. Come and have some Italian food and enjoy.
Uh-huh.
All right, see you, everybody.
Stop
Okay, thank
share.
you.
Okay. Let me get off of the AOL account. Well, I'm going to go ahead and start with a couple of stimulating stories. You guys met Herbert, my student from LA, one time. He came a couple weeks ago. We're continuing on private because he, like you guys, is going to the Beit Din, but I don't know yet whether he's going to come here to Denver or in any event. Herbert was raised in El Salvador and he's been in LA for many years. He works for the city government. And we were talking, we had a class about 2 hours ago. And so, same topic on God. And like some of you, he was raised Catholic or Christian. Um, didn't have, I'm not going to tell you his whole story. He didn't have a whole lot of things jammed down his throat, but his mother was very devoutly Catholic and she just passed away. This is another piece of the action. So he had to go to El Salvador, spend time with her, and deal with the funeral and clean up the house. And, the kind of things you have to do with a family, like you did, Devin, or you still are. Um, but the reason I mention him is because he reminded me of a story that happened to him. El Salvador, even today, is not the safest place to live, but it was worse when he was growing up in the 80s. And there were all these um, uh, government troops and rebels and people fighting. So he told me, he reminded me of this today. He was with some friends of his. I think he was going over to somebody's house and they got to the house and they saw soldiers drive by in a truck um, and park at that house. And, they were just kids. I mean, young, probably teenagers. And they ran around the corner and hid behind a bush or behind a house. And the soldiers stayed there for a little while. And it was his mother's house that he was going to. Um, and the guys left, the soldiers left. A couple days later, um, they found three corpses right nearby. And the thing that is so weird is, these army troops or some of these groups would just shoot indiscriminately. They would shoot first and ask questions later. So he thinks of that as kind of like being saved by God. I'm not saying it taking it literally, but we were talking about how the experiences shape our attitudes. The other thing that he told me and I'm sure some of you may have experiences like this, is when he went down to El Salvador, he was praying, and he knew some Hebrew prayers, he knew some Psalms, and he said something, while mom was there, she was 92 or something. And he's with his brothers and he says, you know, uh, God, please, basically not Jewish, not Christian, just generally, it's time, mom, to go. And we love you. And, the kind of thing that I've done in hospice. And about 3 hours later, she passed on. She died of, it was expected. So we were talking about that. And what I want to ask you guys is not only about, and we'll do a whole unit on death and dying, and also weddings and but all that stuff. But when you were growing up, both as kids and as young adults, and now as people seeking Judaism, what kinds of images have you either gone through or rejected? And I have a piece that we're going to look at. Well, I'll tell you briefly. A man comes to a Hasidic rabbi and says, I don't believe in God, but I still do the prayers because that was what they did. And the Rebbe's answer is, I don't believe in the same God that you don't believe in. So a well-known rabbi who was a teacher of mine said that. So in some ways, this is a very is less complicated topic or chapter tonight rather than history and all the prayers and stuff, because it's very personal. But Judaism does not necessarily prescribe exactly what you must believe. Yet, on the other hand, for all of you guys, you're learning the prayers. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech. What am I saying? So I want to open it up just for Socratic, for a little discussion. And since you're up on my upper left-hand corner, Taylor, you want to go first? Just a little bit, just a glimpse. What I thought, what I believed, what I changed, and what I'm struggling with. And so I'll see if I can answer some of your needs. Go.
I guess I was raised, in a Christian house.
Yeah.
But my brother's Jewish, so I never really, I kind of, I wasn't like, Christian's the only way because I was around.
But your brother converted, right?
Yep, about 20 years ago.
Oh, but so he's older than you. He's significantly older. So you were raised, and he converted on his own with in college. You told us
Yeah, he
before,
was started studying it in high school, taught himself Hebrew, and then in college, I think was when he officially converted. So we did Hanukkah with him, and he'd make latkes for the family, and we did a lot of holidays and stuff. So I kind of was raised to, not just think there was Christianity was the only right way. Then of course, when my son got his heart transplant, I kind of learned to have my own personal relationship with God. I obviously wasn't going to church in the hospital. I read a lot of Psalms. I still do. My mom would always read Psalms when he was getting his surgeries. So
I recommend that. Yes.
Yeah. And then while I was doing some family history research just a couple weeks ago, and I realized, I think some of the preference for the Psalms in the Old Testament, I learned my mom's family were, a lot of them were crypto Jews, I think. So I think that got
that's right.
passed down. Yeah. Because she was always taught, then subsequently I was always taught, they kind of had this thing, they never really believed in the Virgin Mary type thing. So that kind of got passed down. So I think that made Judaism a very natural entry for both my brother and I.
Fascinating. Well, I'm especially, I don't want to do any judgment. I'm fascinated by the fact that you read Psalms or have read Psalms. I recommend them to people. And that's part of my teaching tonight. You don't have to believe literally in everything that's being said. It's energy. And the Psalms, whether they were written by King David or somebody else, are very much all the different emotions: fear, anger, happiness, thank you, anxiety, all these kind of things. So there is a tradition among Hasidic Jews, and I do it too, of certain Psalms are, I don't want to say assigned, but they have energy. So Psalm 23, which everybody has heard, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. It's usually done at funerals, but it's also kind of like pray it when you read it, when you're feeling a little bit anxious. Doesn't have to be talking about the future in life. Psalm 121. So all right, but that's enough of my replies. But since I didn't interrupt, but since I'm telling you, Sam texted me that Emily and him won't make it tonight, family issue. Brooke, who's already been, already Jewish, but she wanted to come, but she had to help a friend. So it's just us guys tonight, which is just fine. So who wants to go next? What do you believe as a Jew? What do you believe before, after, during? Jamie's really good at this. She loves to talk. Anybody wants to share?
Okay, so to go next.
Debbie,
I'm
okay.
I'm
No
a New
camera?
York Jew.
No cameras?
No, no
Okay,
cameras.
okay,
Sorry.
all right.
I'm a New York Jew. Um, the but when I was growing up in the 50s, um, there was no real place in the synagogues for women.
Yep.
You know, so I did not have my bat mitzvah until 2012. I went with I had my, it was a B'nai mitzvah. There were four of us, the youngest being 60, who had never gone through the services. Two of us born Jews, two conversions, but had never had um, the privilege of going through and reading from the Torah. But since then, I've been, I would say, 90% of the time that I really do the services, I do the readings, um, but not able to, I will never be in a kosher home because of how my granddaughter was brought up. And,
Mhm.
I guess as a farmer, I don't think God is any place but every place. When you watch a calf being born, when you watch your crops coming up, when you watch the hailstorm and you have no way to stop it or save your crops, um, that's sort of where God is. He's just every place.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So that's, you know, but again, it wasn't until, I went to Shreveport, Louisiana, where I really got back into the religion.
Fascinating. Yeah. Who else who wants to go next? Because then I'm gonna take over, or not take over, but I'm gonna, we're recording, so I wanted to give over some info, and then we'll have more discussion.
Hey, Rabbi.
Go ahead, Devin.
All right, so I got my technical difficulties straightened out. So
Okay.
I kind of heard everyone's thing. So
God has
what's the
looked
question?
with favor upon your computer.
Right. What's the question? I'm sorry that was.
Just an opening question. Where is God in your life? Where was it when you were younger, growing up Christian or Jewish or atheistic, whatever, and what are your images, or how have your images changed over time?
I'd say growing up we were Christian, but we weren't church going.
Mm-hmm.
I knew there was a God, but I didn't know, for lack of a better term, what flavor Christianity we really were growing up.
Oh, okay.
But I always knew that there was a higher power, and I knew that
Mhm. That's also important.
creator of all things.
Yep.
And I've always believed in the power of prayer. Um, I see God today in really the beauty of everything. The relationships I have with my wife Jamie on here, on my rest of our family, the friends that we continue to make, relationships we have, and even recently some of the trials and tribulations going through life, because it goes up and down. But if you have God in your life, it kind of helps you guide you through. Don't I guess that I've had to be humble in different various things with family issues and passings and whatnot in the past, year and a half, with change and everything, to give myself and not try to control everything myself, but to trust that, God is there, and to trust that there's a plan for God going forward. And I think starting with your classes last year and joining well, unofficially joining the synagogue and the tribe there, a sense of community that I didn't really have growing up in my faith. So
And so even though you had the Christian background, which was different from Jamie's, Jesus, we're not talking about that
Sure.
specific issue tonight, but it was not hard for you to say, I have a relationship with a higher power, God, but I don't have to go with a guy on a cross.
Right. I knew it
Yeah.
was there. I guess I
Yeah.
didn't really do a good job seeking God. I didn't necessarily understand
Hmm.
the whole Christian side of things, nor was I really trying, I suppose.
Gotcha.
But as we were looking to find our spirituality and stuff, it made more sense going the route with the Jewish community here.
Okay, cool. Jamie, did you want to add anything? So you're in separate rooms, right? All right, because I mean, you guys can talk again at the end, but I mean, or later. I just want to get a little started. Um, but so
So
uh,
she's having some technical difficulties on the bad one I
okay,
just switched
everybody's,
from,
yeah.
so
So,
we could
but
pass back
again,
and forth.
it is being recorded, so we'll be able to save it. There's no new message. Oh, Christina, Christina, can everybody see what Christina wrote? Okay,
Yep.
she'd prefer to. Oh boy, oh boy. Have we got some interesting things? Read what she just wrote. Yeah. Calvinist background, atheism, agnostic, deism, paganism, Taoism. Yeah, fascinating. Do you live in town, Christina? You live in Cheyenne or out of town? She's typing. Okay. Oh, you don't have to divulge. And when Jamie's able to, oh, near the synagogue. Okay, cool. Well, come on over this coming Friday. Anyway, let me start by um, this is a lot of different experiences. Some of it's very subjective. Some of it's got to do with Hebrew. And I don't know who got to read what, but we're going to look at an article from the intro program in Denver and my own learning as well. And I urge you, I think it's a very important chapter in Ted's book, Ted Falcon. Chapter 1 is what I do, who are the Jews, the different styles, the different movements. We're going to do a whole thing on the movements in the context of Jewish history, but I'll get back to that in a minute. But chapter 2 is, to some extent, the issue of belief. So I urge you to read that chapter. I also suggested that you read anything in Tolushkin. They got to go by the index because it's all different places. And in Blech's book, which was not required reading, but it becomes important, I think, and we're all using it, is part 2, or actually part 1, chapter 2, man and woman, one God, one man, in his image, and one God, but two sexes, and so on. So anyway, before we get into the history stuff, what I want to do is sort of go back to this. So this Hasidic guy comes to the Rebbe and he says, I don't believe in this, but I'm doing it anyway. Now, I had a rabbi, was at a summer camp, Rabbi Ira Eisenstein, who was the son-in-law of Mordecai Kaplan of the Reconstructionist movement, said that same phrase with a bunch of kids, from synagogues, and I was teaching at this camp. And a lot of us rejected this not childhood belief, but the either Christian or Western religious belief that, but we don't say it this way, but the idea is that God is still some kind of hairy thunderer, like the Michelangelo painting, of the creation of the world. Nice background, Christina. The birds, that's God. Those are bats. Okay, never mind. But anyway, still interesting. I like what Devin said, though, about several of you said nature. So, but anyway, the guy says, I don't believe in God. And I think what a lot of people struggle with, young Jews, older Jews, a lot of us, of all backgrounds, is we're told when we're kids, somebody died, let's pray for them, or I'll pray for you. And then we hit a brick wall. It could be somebody dies, we have an illness, we have an addiction, and that's why, by the way, if I can mention this, in AA and NA and these kind of programs, they don't say pray, pray, pray. They say a higher power. It's a better word. But Judaism, I remember the very first classes, maybe not all of you were there for that. The very first classes, I said belonging, then behaving, and then believing. In some ways, that's very true. There are many people who go to synagogues and aren't sure what they believe in, or they don't sit around and the difference in the Christian world is you join a church because you come to believe this ideology that Jesus does this, or and they argue a lot about the ideologies. Even though there are 4 or 5, depending on how you count, movements in Judaism, they're not denominations in the same sense that the Presbyterians or the Episcopalians or the Catholics are. They only, I'm not saying it's the only difference, or the major difference is you go to one kind of synagogue. I was just discussing this with Sam and Emily yesterday. We had a private. You could go to a conservative synagogue and it could be very traditional, or it could be very hip, like me, guitar, but yet like Hebrew. You could go to Reform synagogue and you expect it to be very innovative. It might be traditional. So it's a style question. What prayers do they leave out? How much are women and men equal participating? What's the style of the rabbi? And these days, frankly, in the Denver and Colorado area, and up here in the mountains too, Mount Montana, quite a few synagogues are simply unaffiliated. They just don't name it. So like I said, and I'll repeat this. Oh, I'll give you I'm sorry, I'm jumping around on purpose. Next week, we will start a 3-week study of history, which will start with biblical. Again, we're not going to be able to cover everything, but a survey of biblical history and, the Torah and the prophets, and up until the destruction of the first temple. Then we'll start the later period, the rabbinic period, including Hanukkah. And hopefully we'll hit, Hanukkah comes very late this year, but we'll hit the Greek period, and then we'll get into the Roman period. So what I'm saying is the discussions about God and theology have a lot to do with different time periods. And that's what I'm going to start with in a minute. I'm being too general. I want to get more specific. So, but to repeat what I said, you could be like that guy and say, I'm not sure. I don't know. And, there's an old joke. What is the difference between an atheist and an agnostic? The agnostic says, the atheist says, I deny Eloheinu, right? Baruch atah, Shema Yisrael, I deny Eloheinu. And the agnostic says, Shema Yisrael, I don't know Eloheinu. I don't know. But we still pray. So sometimes, and that's what Kaplan and the Reconstructionist movement talked about, is sometimes it's very meaningful to do prayers and blessings and rituals like building a sukkah. So we reinterpret a lot of these rituals. We don't sit around and talk God, 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 God. However, the problem is, in order to get in the door, of the Beit Din, I'm the rabbi and the other rabbis are there. So we are a religious community, but we're also a cultural community, as I said in that very first class. Okay, so it's important to know some of the terms that we're talking about. I will say this, and I'll say it somewhat humorously. I would be happy if the term God were just not used, not outlawed, but it's so confusing because we immediately, as soon as you say God or God bless, either the mind goes, it's like, saying, I don't know, science, hydrogen, man, woman, we all see those images. So as soon as you say God, it goes to a Western kind of mindset. Let's see. So did you all see the article, the chapter 8? And that's what I'm going to put up here. That's the one from, let's see, where is it? I had it. I've already downloaded it. Why can't I get it again? Okay, hang on. Oh, shoot. All right, hang on. I gotta go back to the, did you all open up your email? First of all, because it's all in there. Okay. So the one I'm looking at is, the article, it's called, chapter 8. All right. So I'll put it up there. So let's go back to the Torah. It's not all in there, but I'm gonna talk. So the very first chapter, why don't I have it? Documents. Why don't I have it? I had it up here a second ago. It's right here. Okay, oh, do you see it? Okay, there it is. It says God wrestling. Okay. Before we get to Jacob, do you see this now? Do y'all see chapter 8, Encountering the Holy? Got it? Yes, no?
Yeah, we see it.
Okay.
Yep.
So, all right. So, very first chapter of Genesis, an amorphous God with the name Elohim creates everything, right? Man, woman, stars, moon, lizards, goats, and then says, it's good. It's all good, especially human beings. But the second chapter of Genesis, if you look at it carefully, and you don't have to know the Hebrew, the name changes to, in the English, it says the Lord God, right? Which I'll talk about that in a minute. But the Hebrew word is, in the first chapter is Elohim. The second chapter is Yud He Vav He, or Yahweh. What we translate today is Adonai. Adonai, the second chapter, and it's the same God, by the way, just a different name. The second chapter is a very personal intervention God that looks and says, it's not good for the human to be alone. Remember, it's not man, it's just one being. And the rabbis have a whole midrash where they say, oh no, it was one being with both genders. I'm not going to try to explain that one. And God splits it in half and turns them around to face each other and make them into man and woman. But it's very personal, right? God is give me your rib, but go to sleep. And so everything in chapter 2 is very personal. So we derive from that the idea that, and this is a little bit of Kabbalah, just a taste of it, is God has many names. The Jewish God, the Hebrew God has many names, and you'll hear them throughout, and we're going to get to that page in a minute. And please download it and keep it. And there's some of them are more complex than others to explain. So God is both transcendent, that's Elohim, and immanent. By that I mean involved in your life. When you're sitting there at the Red Sea, that's what they did. They said, "Who is like you, O God?" And they don't say Elohim, they say Yod He Vav He. Excuse me, I should have brought my water. So Yod He Vav He, and I'll get to it in a minute, is a word or a phrase for that which will be, the future. So I guess I'll go ahead to that. No, not there. Okay, but we started to do Jacob. When Moses is at the mountain in Exodus, and and he sees the burning bush, and a voice comes through to the burning bush and says, I am the Lord your God, right? And it says, previously, or to your fathers, I was known by another name. And if you look at it carefully, you look at El Shaddai for Jacob, El Elyon for Abraham. And so God's names evolve over time. But then God says to Moses, I shall be called Yud He Vav He, which I'm not translating, but translation is Lord, right? Forevermore. That is my name. So what I'm giving you, and we're going to get to this phrase in just a minute, is the idea that over time, back in the Bible days, over time, God, whatever God was, it evolved as a name. And even there's even another thought, and that is Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu. Let's look at this page. I'll come back to Jacob in a minute. Shema Yisrael, right? Hear, O Israel, there's the word Adonai, which is Yud He Vav He, or JHWH, is Eloheinu. Well, Elohim, I just said, is the God, just the God idea. And Yud He Vav He is the personal name. There's another theory, which is not so far-fetched, that in that time, Judea the southern area tended to have the name Yahweh, or Yud He Vav He. I don't translate it. Adonai, as we said. And the northern half tended to use Elohim. And so what Moses is really saying is, hey, listen, everybody, it's the same God. Isn't that interesting? You know, Adonai is your Elohim. All right, let's go back to the Jacob story. These are all metaphors, poetry. And so the story, as you may remember, is Jacob. Am I going too fast? You guys are following? Okay. These are all encounters with God, right? Adam and Eve, Moses, Noah. So Jacob has sent, he's going to meet Esau the next day. He's scared out of his wits, right? Because Esau is angry at him that he stole his birthright, etc., etc. And in this story, Parshat Toledot, he sends the women and the children and the handmaidens across the river, and he stays on the other side of the Yabok, and a man comes in the middle of the night and wrestles with him. I mean, you've seen this before. Who are these men who keep on showing up, right? Who are the three men who come to greet Abraham, and says, Sarah's going to have a child. So the Torah doesn't say they're angels, but there's this feeling that they're messengers. So this man wrestles with him until dawn. I do a whole, commentary on this, and you could perhaps interpret it that it was Esau's angel, or it's Jacob's conscience, or it really is an angel from God. But so they're fighting, and it's kind of very mystical. And then finally, he gets to the point, it says here, when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he wrenched Jacob's hip at its socket, and that's why Jacob was limping for the rest of his days. And then the angel says, let me go, or the man, I'm saying man here, and he says, I will not go and let you go until you bless me. It's very powerful. All right. So the man or the angel says, what is your name? Yaakov, the one who, came out second, the follower, the usurper. He grabbed onto his brother's heel. So Akev means heel. It says, your name is no longer Jacob, but Israel, for you have wrestled with God and man. And that name, Yisrael, means wrestlers with God. So we are the God wrestlers. I don't mean that literally, but we argue, we debate, we connect, we strive, but we don't sit, and I'm not criticizing any other religion. We don't say you must believe, well, I should clarify that. By the Middle Ages, Maimonides did say all Jews must believe these 13 principles. So this is a development. But we are in a place where God has many different attributes. Now, we're going to look at some of those names here. But first, I have another story for you. I hope you're following me because I have a very broad background. In LA, I was living in Long Beach, and I got a position teaching in a community college, teaching Western religions. So for 2 years, I taught Judaism, Christianity, Islam, did a great job with it, and I learned a lot about Islam. And the department head contacted me and said, oh, shoot, we forgot, we assigned somebody else for that one, because it's a very small college. Would you please teach Eastern religions? So suddenly I got to bone up on, I knew a lot about Buddhism. I had to bone up on Hinduism and Taoism and Confucianism. It's first day of class, I come in, and this is a community college like LCCC, or what's that one in Sacramento? I mean, in Fort Collins, I can't remember, Greeley. So I come into the class, and again, this is community college. There's Christian kids, and there's all different backgrounds. And I said, I hope nobody will be offended. especially the Christians among you, because we will be studying a polytheistic religion, Hinduism, right? Because they have Ganesh, Shiva, Shakti, all these different names. 3 hands go up, shoot up in the back of the room. And it was the 3 kids from India. They were Sikhs. Sikh is a segment of subset of Hindus. They said, you're wrong. They are different names for the faces, but they're all one. So what they were raised with, even though Americans or Western people think, oh, look at all this, they have these idols, and they have, Ganesh is the elephant god. And it just seems so strange to Westerners. For them, it's just, maybe they didn't go all the way. So I'm giving you some maybe new information for you. God, the Jewish God view, I'm not talking about theology here, I'm talking about language. It's like, okay, I'm just going to use, Taylor. Taylor is mommy, she's wife, she's woman, she's whatever your profession is. Moshe is rabbi, musician, man, liberal, so all these things. So God is not just God, G-O-D, but all of these names that are on this page have deeper meanings of I guess, again, this is all metaphor, looking at a diamond, or that old story about the 10 blind men who felt the elephant. And one guy says an elephant is like a snake because he's feeling the trunk. Another guy says an elephant is like a teeth because he's feeling the tusk. Another guy's feeling the trunk. I mean, the feet. Oh, an elephant's like a tree. So all of these names that began to be used are still used today. Now, some of them, I would have done this slightly differently. I would have grouped them. They're traditional. Some are mystical. Some are Hasidic. Some are today took on new meaning. So I mentioned, for example, down here, number 12. Again, it's not pronounced. Yud He Vav He. That's what Moses hears at the burning bush. God says, I will be, I am, I was, I am. And it's a verb, by the way, that's a verb. Haya, to be. And then Moses says, yeah, okay, that's very interesting, God, but what am I supposed to say when I go to Egypt? What should I tell them? Who sent me? And God says, okay, if you need something, tell them number 49, Ehyeh sent you. And that Ehyeh is that future verb. Tell them, I will be sent you. What? So again, God in that sense is future potentiality. That which is, what was, will be. It's almost like I'm talking like Luke Skywalker, right? Or Obi-Wan Kenobi. May the force be with you. God, in this sense, the name Yod He Vav He implies that God is a force of life. But, you don't have to personify it. Okay, so then we have Ehyeh and Yod He Vav He. By the Second Temple period, they felt that somehow, number one, they felt that somehow the name was so holy that they couldn't say it. Only the high priest knew it and could say it. Do you get the idea that God slowly becomes, I mean, not becomes, but their image of God becomes, oh, you can't say that. You can't say that. Only in prayer. So they started using a term which today we use, Adonai. Okay. And Adonai translates in Hebrew as my Lord. And by the way, for any of you who grew up Christian, I grew up I went to college, in high school, I was in a chorus choir. We sang Kyrie eleison. Kyrie is the word for in the Greek and the Latin for Jupiter, and in the translations that you read in the Septuagint, they have everywhere it says Adonai, they do Kyrie. Okay, so that's how we got stuck with Lord. And you all know that, I was talking to Herbert earlier. In Spanish, they say El Señor, El Señor. What do you mean, Señor Rodriguez? Sorry to make a joke. Yeah. So El Señor, it means the Lord. So throughout all the Middle Ages, Jews are using Adonai, Christians are using my Lord. And now when I was growing up, you translated the prayers that we do today. We say, Blessed art thou, O Lord, our God, King of the universe, all that stuff. So part of what happens is the names become very meaningful, but also we get lost in them, and it gets difficult because you get stuck on these ideas of men with powdered wigs. We don't have kings anymore, So the mystics started to do some other things. Among them was number 3. This is very beautiful. Hasidic Jews will not sit around and they will not use the name. You do not use the word Adonai unless it's in prayer. So they say the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy Blessed One, or the Holy One, blessed be He, right? Or number, where is it? Number 16, Hashem. I love that. I mean, that I spend time among the Orthodox in the Orthodox world. But even though I'm a liberal Jew, I will sometimes say, may Hashem bless you. Because it's like I'm not sitting there and saying, I have power to take God's name in vain. I'm not saying you should never do it. Oh, before I finish about Adonai, it got to the point, and I should have mentioned this earlier, it got to the point where if you can't take the name outside of prayer, you shouldn't say Adonai unless it's in prayer. So they started saying Hashem or Adoshem. And guess what? A lot of us, you may have seen this, a lot of us had Israelis or religious teachers in religious school and synagogues, and they would write on the board G-D, right? Because you're not supposed to write the name. So if I say God, notice that this has God, God, God everywhere. But there are people that pious that if they can't write out Yud Hey Vav, you get what I'm saying? You can't write out Yud Hey Vav Hey, and I will not do that. If I'm writing on the board, I will write it differently. I will write it with a kuf, and people will say that. They'll say, "Is that making sense?" Yud K Vav K. So the name is so holy, it's like my beloved. You wouldn't, God is my beloved. So I don't want to take it in vain. So then other people said, okay, further, to the point where now people will go G-G. I don't necessarily think that's required, but it's a good thing to keep that in mind. So we have some of these names, like I said, coming from the Hasidic tradition, Hashem, or the Orthodox, Kadosh Baruch Hu, and then we have this beautiful, there's a Hiyeh. We have a beautiful term that you may, especially perhaps if you grew up with a Christian background. We're going to do a unit on Kabbalah, but at the top of the tree is a term you may not know. Over here, number 20, Ein Sof. Ein Sof. A mystical book called the Zohar says that in the beginning created God. They translate it that way. And the word Elohim is a name or a cover, a blanket over for God. But the real name, the real part of God is that we can't see except mystics can, and you maybe when you die, is Ein Sof. It's like Godhead, if you want to call it that. So Ein Sof is way up at the top of the tree, the infinite. And then at the bottom of the tree, and I don't mean bottom but on our earthly plane, is number 39. How many of you have heard the term Shekhinah before? Nobody? Okay. Shekhinah is a beautiful term that evolved out of the idea that there was a presence resting upon the people. It says, when they went through the desert, remember we were at the sukkah. Oh, so we've got chat here. Let me see what am I missing? Do I have to unlog to get chat? Let's see, just a second. Was that, I can't, I have to stop share to look at the chat. Sorry. All right. Oh, Kyrie eleison is used a lot in, yes, Christian and Lutheran. Yeah. So Kyrie eleison means our holy Lord, I guess. Okay, Shekhinah. Yes, you're right, Christina, and maybe Jamie too. There are women today who have taken the name Shekhinah as kind of cool name, a kind of new agey name. But what it meant in the context of Jewish mysticism is this presence, and this is going to sound awfully Christian, but I'm relating it. In Christianity, they came up with the idea that there's the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit. Well, I don't want to say it's the same thing, but the best idea I could give you, and we'll get into it when we do the Kabbalah stuff, is when you're in a room and you feel a presence, a feeling, a connection, even just a feeling with the other people. You're all singing, you're all davening, you're dancing. It's this feeling. So the problem also was, this is related to the destruction of the temple. When the temple was destroyed, they had to come up with a way of having faith. And so what they said is the Shekhinah went into exile with you. So this presence, and often, this is where I'll bridge into the current period, often it was pictured as, I don't want to say it's actually male and female, but Shekhinah was an image of, because a lot of mothers were dying in the time of the temple. And so that Mother Rachel became a symbol. So the Shekhinah was sometimes pictured as a feminine side of God, and Avinu was a masculine side of God. Remember, it's all one God. No, there's no separate gods. We're not talking about, different gods. It's all one. But this Shekhinah is a beautiful term. Now, what has happened is, when the feminist movement began to affect Judaism, people began to resent, including me, not just women, started saying, why do we always talk about God, Father, 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 he. So let's have God, she. So Shekhinah became, for a lot of women of the 70s, 80s, now today, in Jewish renewal circles, we will sometimes say Shekhinah. I mean, I could also, this is another discussion, I could do a whole blessing in feminine. Blessed are you, O source of life, living spirit of all time and space. There's nothing in it that says he. There's nothing in it that says king. You get it? So anyway, we're still stuck with, I'll not say stuck, we still use these terms. You were all there for high holidays. Number 40. Avinu Malkeinu Chanenu. So are we praying to God literally as a king, or the father, our daddy, daddy, daddy? No, but we use the images as a way of relating. So you may notice sometimes, maybe not with traditionalists because they'll get all confused, I will sometimes sing that in the feminine too. Our mother, our queen. But I read a very prominent women theologian, forgot her name, Martha Acklesberg, who said to use God language in the feminine is also idolatrous. So God is beyond gender. We know that, but there's a need to develop a kind of a language. So we have some of these terms. Let me hit one or two more that are non-gendered. Okay. Mekor HaChaim. I love that. Mekor HaChaim, the source of life. And you will see that sometimes when they translate a word, they'll say, blessed are you, O source of life. It's non-gendered, right? Rifa'enu, our healer. I mentioned Ein Sof, that's mystical. You could use a term like shalom. Shalom is one of God's names. Would you believe that? So all of these are beautiful ways of looking at the God self. So let me turn to a few of the pieces of our literature. Here we have Elijah, right? And Elijah is running away from Jezebel, and he says here, he came to a cave and he spent the night, and the word of Adonai came to him. What are you doing here? I have been zealous, right? And God said, go out and stand on the mountain. And behold, Adonai went by. A huge, strong wind broke the mountains to pieces, but Adonai was not in the wind. And after the wind came an earthquake, and Adonai was not in the earthquake. And after the wind came a fire, but Adonai was not in the fire. And after the fire came a still small voice. So I just love that idea. So I want to not conclude this, but I want us to open up for conversation. But one more little thing here. This is a midrash, and this is in this material. The discussion, y'all see this? Yossi Bar Chanina, the rabbi from the midrash period, from the Greco-Roman period, says, when the manna descended for Israel, it tasted differently to everyone. To the infants, it tasted like mother's milk. To the young, it tasted like bread and honey, bread and oil and honey. To the elders, it tasted like wafers. So in the same way as the manna tasted in each person's mouth, so each person heard God's speech. And this talked about Sinai. So I skipped this one, fire on the mountain, right? The mountain was all full of smoke. So what happens, and I guess I could get into this discussion too, but I rather just, instead of read Menachem Creditor, each of these are different rabbis, mostly from the LA area. I know several of them, Eli Spitz, and Rabbi Menachem Creditor. But rather than what God is, maybe you could say what God isn't, But I want to end with that. Here's another piece. Even in the prayers, this is one thing I shared with the group. See if I can find it again. There's a prayer from when that's used. Here it is. Anim Zemirot. I will pull it up again. It's in the share. It's in the chat. It's going to be complicated because it is a medieval poem, but I just want you to see what even the most devout mystics of the Middle Ages saw. They call this the Hymn of Glory. Rabbi Judah the Pious, a German rabbi, 13th century, and I used to sing this poem. Anim Zemirot v'shirim ha'arov. I will sing beautiful hymns to try to understand you, God. I'm doing my own translation here. The mystery of your secrets, your love, my heart will ever beat. Though I have not seen you, of your being I relate. And we don't want to have images. That's why in a synagogue, you typically don't have, we have stained glass windows at the synagogue, but we don't have any picture of the Sistine Chapel with God as an old man, touching Adam's finger. So they said, in myriad varied visions you have been portrayed, yet through all the images as one you have remained. In old age and in youth they envisioned you with a hoary head of age, jet back curls of youth. In other words, what they're saying is words fail. This is what this poem is doing, is words fail to express what God was for them. All right, I'll stop there. I'll stop there with the historical stuff. Let me conclude, at least the teaching part. What time we got? 7:55. Every person who wants to be a religious person needs to struggle with this or wrestle with God. I could say it this way, and you're gonna maybe, but it's just so cute. You could, as a believing Jew, as a kid, as an adult, you could say, I pray because of God. I pray literally. I need the prayers, even if I don't know what everything means. I'm praying because I'm feeling a sense of connection. All right. That's number one. You could pray in spite of God. Like, I don't want to say anything nasty, but God, I'm angry at you. How dare you do this? But you're still there. But why did you allow so-and-so to die? Why? People are still freaking out over October 7th. People are still freaking out about the Holocaust, any kind of suffering. And there was a famous rabbi who was Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, who would literally say, Abba, God, how dare you? Why aren't you keeping your promises to the people of Israel? So that's another level of, I believe in you, like I hate to say it, like I'm in a relationship with you, but you argue with your spouse. I see Taylor's smiling, and Devin and Jamie don't want to go on the camera, but we've all been married to somebody or been in a relationship and you get angry, but we love them. All right. Number 3, you could pray as if God. That's what a lot of people do. They say, I don't know. And there's another joke here. Shema, an agnostic or an atheist would say, Shema Israel, I deny Eloheinu. You get that joke? The agnostic would say, Shema Yisrael, I don't know Eloheinu. So these are just jokes, but they belie a deeper message. You could be going to shul, all of you, and Debbie and I talked about this just before you got on. So you could go to shul and say, I'm going to pray these prayers, I'm going to do these motions, and maybe I'll feel some sense of godliness. All right, so number 1, because I believe, I don't know what I'm saying, but I believe it'll come. I believe in spite of God, I'm angry at the terrible things that are happening in the world, but I'm going to challenge God. That's the God wrestling thing. As if God. And the other one, the last one, is hoping to kind of like, in the there's a humanist Judaism. There's a part of a group of Jews who are humanists. We don't have any here in the greater Rockies area, but there are some in Canada, LA. They're not as big as they used to be because everybody's realizing they need prayer. All right, to some extent. By the way, I'm interested, Christina, because you mentioned Taoism. Now I'll get a little bit personal with you and say that for me and for many rabbis like me, we have all gone through these journeys. And I grew up, like you all know, with your Reform thing, I did the prayers, I learned the prayers, the Hebrew. I didn't know what it meant, but I learned them. And then I went to Israel, and for those 2 or 3 years that I was in the Orthodox world, I learned the Hebrew. And even though I still had my doubts, it meant a great deal to me to be able to daven in the Hebrew. By the way, the word daven, we say that in Yiddish, comes from, these are all meanings of words. We don't say pray. I mean, you might hear people say that, I'm praying for you. I'm davening. What is davening, right? Doing this number. To get in touch with the divine. They used a word that is divine, right? So you're being in a spiritual place. And I'll get to another cute story in a minute. So that I went through that period. Now when I pray, I will do both. I will do the thought, the prayer, and I'll use the traditional. So for example, if you had a car accident or you had a serious operation, I had last year, some of you weren't around, I had a serious health issue where I had diverticulosis. It was kind of crazy, but I had lost a lot of blood. And I was in the hospital for 2 days. And I started crying, as I realized, I was getting better, but I was in the hospital. I said, I came out and I came to the shul and I asked everybody to listen as I did a prayer. The blessing is, Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you, God, who has had grace upon me. And then they all answer, may you have grace the next time. You had a car accident, or God forbid you just missed a car, somebody ran through an intersection, but you're okay. Also, you're supposed to say this blessing when you come back from a long journey, when you come back from Israel. So this goes back to the issue of prayer. We make these moments holy. So pray as if God, pray in spite of God, pray to experience God. So I'll end with my piece. And we got 8 o'clock. what we got? 801. There are many rabbis of all different backgrounds. As I said, and we haven't covered the movements yet. Orthodox, you know where they stand. That, by the way, they don't sit around and argue. They do prayer, but they don't say, what do you believe? What do you believe? What do you believe? Just do the prayers. Conservative kind of say, we don't know who wrote the Bible. We believe God gave it to Moses, and we'll get to that when we get into the movements. But I was raised with this Reform kind of background, and I then moved to Reconstructionism, and I don't want to do alphabet soup with you, but Mordecai Kaplan. Oh, Rick's here. Oh, I knew we were missing somebody. All right, Rick, welcome. We were recording. We're getting recorded anyway. So Mordecai Kaplan, this is we will do this in context when we get to the modern period. That's in January or February. Kaplan was raised in Lithuania, which, if you don't know, even today, the Litvaks, as they would call them, are all the rationalists, all the great chess players, like Boris whatever his name was. All they came from Russia. So Lithuania was a hotbed of rationalism when he was growing up in the late 1800s. He comes to America and he realizes, the Jews in the Upper West Side are all Reform. We're a religion, and the style of the service was organs and choirs and robes. And the new Jews who come over from Russia were all Orthodox. And there were also secular Jews and Zionists. And he says, you're all wrong. Judaism is a civilization. If you remember, that was one of the first units. Well, I'm not teaching you Reconstructionism, but what I'm saying is a number of my colleagues, the Reform movement has now moved where there's reform, and more religious reform. The conservative movement, there are some that are more traditional, almost Orthodox, and some that are, a woman rabbi, a gay rabbi, a trans rabbi. We change the prayers. We have guitars, but they're not Reformed. They still do the prayers traditional, but it's, they want to be in the conservative movement. So in the Reconstructionist movement, a lot of us, including me, I went to the seminary and I unlearned some of the things I had learned with the Orthodox. God is a force for transformation. So Kaplan was very rationalistic. Okay, very rational. Don't tell people stuff that they have to then unlearn. Don't talk about miracles, talk about faith. But he was a faithful man. So a colleague of mine, Rabbi Arnie Rockless, out in Irvine, is very much in this mold. A rational rabbi. I don't believe in angels, right? Don't give me this bullshit, I don't believe in this crap. But then he said something really interesting, and I use this myself. If you tell me, go back to the early story, the guy says, I don't believe in God. Well, I don't believe in the same God as you don't believe in. But do you believe in love? This is what I answer to a lot of you guys. Do you believe in kisses? Do you believe in eating a bagel with friends? So this is what Arnie said, the guy from Irvine, that I do like. He said, I'm not interested in knowing whether you believe every little thing in the Torah. I want to know, where do you experience spirituality in your life? And so now we'll open for discussion, but the task for a lot of you guys, and I include Debbie in this, Debbie is the only person in the room who was raised as a Jew, but a lot of us struggle with the prayers. Now, it's going to take time. That's what I'm doing with Sam and Emily to some extent. It takes time to learn the prayers. It takes time to interpret the prayers. I know that you're all looking at the transliteration and the translation, and that's why sometimes, we'll say, here's an interpretive version of that. But I hope that some of these words that I gave you, if you say a God of healing, right? So feeling that sense of oneness. So to conclude, my part, as I said, what do you look for in Judaism with prayer? One thing we don't do, and this is, I'll repeat this, is I said this before about Christianity. We don't tell people it's not legit. Every synagogue that I know that's of the modern type, liberal, reform, conservative, well, conservative, they don't talk about it that much, but generally speaking, people don't sit around and say, what do you believe? What do you believe? They do argue with the text. So going back to the very first class, we are a people of faith. We are an evolving religious civilization, and I'll rest here, okay? And Rick, I'm sorry, but you'll have the recording. Let's hear anybody who would like to share, but or argue with me. Go ahead and argue with me.
Hey, Rabbi.
Are you saying, Rabbi, you don't have to believe in God? What?
Just a quick question off topic
Yeah.
since Rick did join late. Is anything that you were showing on screen going to need to be downloaded to the chat, or is that was included in the emails already?
It was included in the emails as well.
Okay.
But I do want to talk about next week, but couple of other things, but I don't want to do, yes, read everything I sent you, but almost most important, guys, read chapter 2. Chapter 1 of Falcon is sort of like my first class. Who's a Jew? What kind of Jews are there? Where do we live? The somewhat of the different movements. Chapter 2 is his take on God. He mentions arguing with God, what's in a name, calling God by many names, the 4-letter name. There's no end to the names, going beyond he and she. And this is very important, I think. God, the relationship between God and us is God is a creator, creates, like somebody said, he loved nature. God creates, God reveals, Torah, wisdom, law, ethics, and God redeems. God helps us. But again, I repeat what I said. The Hebrew words are much more meaningful, or even English words. So you can say, when you say Adonai, you're doing a prayer, but you could say, I'm praying with, I don't know, I mentioned this thing about davening. We're praying, we're energizing energy. We're bringing energy into a group. All of you have been involved, or you've known people who've been sick. You notice that sometimes people will lay their hands over them. That's not so New Age. It's very common, So you're saying, I'm bringing it, it's like the Kohanim would do this because God's energy was flowing through them. So sometimes, not always, I sometimes find it easier to use a term like the divine or the higher realms or even higher power. All right. I keep on saying that I'm. So, Devin, you mean take everything I sent to you and everything I read and put in the chat, but also read chapter 2 of Dummies. And even though I didn't require it, it's becoming more important to get Blech's take on it. He has chapter 2, one God, one man. What is a human being? Free will. Oh, this is great. He has on page 30, we are partners with God. Do you love that idea? That when we do Tikkun Olam, I say this a lot, when we light candles, we're bringing, I'm going to sound like a new ager, I know that, but when we light candles or when we do Havdalah or we build a sukkah, we are bringing that divine energy into the world. And so Tikkun Olam is a term that was prominent in the 16th century. And today it means I did something that was loving and healing. My work in the prison for 16 years, it was supposed to be just a job. Oh, go be a chaplain in prison. It turned out it was my Tikkun Olam work. It was my justice work. I was being paid by the state to heal people, to help people, to heal. Almost all of my original group is out. Some of the lifers are still there, but they're very spiritual. And then also another term I want you to know is tikkun, which means healing or fixing, hanefesh. Devin, sometime we'll talk about that, man. Healing your soul is a part of healing the world. All right, I keep on going back to a sermon. Um, who has another question? Did God really part the Red Sea? Did God really speak to Abraham? Does God still speak to us today? What? Who's got a hot one? Debbie. No? All right. Well, sometimes, and
Hey,
I noticed,
Rabbi, I have
yes,
one actually.
go ahead, yeah.
It's kind of an odd one, but
Hmm.
are there ways to hear, you hear people say like they heard the voice of God in like dire situations, or they're even able to connect with a past loved one, that kind of thing. And probably all kind of
Well,
balled
it's
into
not
one
that
thing.
weird. That's
Is
not that
that
weird.
I know a lot of that, it seems to be around Catholicism, definitely Christianity itself.
Sure.
What are the views on?
Well, it,
I just hit a telephone pole in my car and I thought I was
Mhm.
dying. I heard the voice of God speak to me, and it wasn't ready for me to come home yet. So I felt
Wait, this
myself go
happened.
back into
You're
my
talking about
car.
a real experience you
No, no,
had?
no, no, no.
Oh,
Just you'll hear
somebody
stories
might
like that.
say, I'm on the
Yeah.
phone and suddenly, yeah.
Like I hear the voice of God. I thought I was crossing over and I was told
Uh,
it's not your time to come home yet,
right.
that kind of thing. Is there something in that realm in Judaism?
I would go with number one, I would go with psychological and mystical. And we'll get into this when we do the Kabbalah unit. Um, as I said, there's all different kinds of Judaism. There's rational and mystical. Um, but and also we'll get into it when we talk about the death and dying unit. Um, this is another connected issue. We don't sit around and talk in literal terms. I don't know how many Christians actually mean it literally, but they talk in terms of heaven and hell. By the way, you all know that by now. We don't believe in a hell literally, but there is a concept in the Middle Ages and come forward to kind of like the soul goes through 11 months of judgment or journey. Am I really dead? What was my life about? And there's this mystical belief that while they're doing that, we're doing the Kaddish. But let me answer your deeper question. Um, Throughout the centuries, some Jews have had or have talked about mystical experiences. What I have a difficult time with is somebody who says, God spoke to me and said, you should go there. I mean, what are you, a prophet? I think the rabbis decided after the end of the Second Temple that there was no more prophecy. And yet, there were false messiahs. There were other people who claimed they'd be messiahs. I'm not even talking about Jesus. There was, Shabtai Tzvi in the middle in 16th century. The Hasidic movement was very much about God as a personal experience. Remember in the movie in Ushpizin, he's saying Abba, 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 Abba. So I know that when people are near death, or many people even are legally or whatever the word is when you flatline, that movie Flatliners, they experience things. And so there's all kinds of answers. Some people think that the soul itself is just a part of that energy that's, part of the body. I think, I mean, I'm not giving you the answer, I'm giving you an answer. I believe that there is something beyond our body, our soul, and I do like Kabbalah for this reason because it talks about, and we'll do this, but we did a little bit of it. Remember, there's 4 levels. I'm a body. I'm a group of emotions: love, hate, anger, frustration. I have a mind, and then I have a spirit, and I'm going up here. So the Kabbalah teaches that there's a realm, and so does Hinduism, Atman, the crown chakra. So I do not think that today uh, anybody could say literally, God wants so and so to be president. But I could say that God protects Israel. All right, but we protect Israel, so we are the hands of God. Oh, let me see if I can find one more prayer for you guys. This is really great. By the way, read the article how Jews pray by Jewish Learning. I'll send it out again, but I wanted to see if I can find for you is a prayer or an interpretive thing that my colleague, my friend Rabbi Rami Shapiro wrote, and it goes. It is. Remember, we do the Ahavat Olam on Friday night. God, thank you, God, for creating the Torah. You loved us. You gave us the Torah. So Rami Shapiro, who was raised Reform, became a kind of a Buddhist-oriented guy, and then became a Reform rabbi, and then he joined the Reconstructionist movement. That's not important, but he was struggling with this same issue of God. Now here it is, if I can find it. It's under okay, it's under Avodah. So the Reconstructionist prayer books, not important. It's several prayer books have included this reading. If I can just find it here, and I know it almost by heart, but I want to give you his quote, and I'll put it in the chat too. Let's see. Where is it? Okay, the Sidur. Oh, here it is. Okay. So I'm going to put it on the screen share just a second. And it's interesting because Rami is being both mystical and rational at the same time. So this is the prayer or the reading after the Ahavat Olam, right? We are loved. And he writes, we are loved by an unending love. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. There it is. Okay, so let me hit the screen share. Listen to this powerful idea. Remember, your hands are the hands of God. And that's my way of seeing it, okay? He writes, or somebody else want to read this?
I can read it if no one else wants to.
Okay, go for it.
Unless you want to.
Oh, no, I want to hear it. Yeah. Oops, lost it. 1 second. Oh, come on, stop. Everything's going crazy on there. I want to make it a little bit bigger for you.
Yeah, I was trying to zoom in. I can't see it.
All right, hang on. There we go.
We are loved by an unending love. We are embraced by arms that find us, even when we are hidden from ourselves. We are touched by fingers that soothe us, even when we are too proud for soothing. We are counseled by voices that guide us, even when we are too embittered to hear. We are loved by an unending love. We are supported.
That's the unending love is like the chorus. Go ahead.
We are supported by hands that uplift us, even in the midst of a fall. We are urged on by eyes that meet us, even when we are too weak for meeting. We are loved by an unending love, embraced, touched, soothed, and counseled. Ours are the arms, the fingers, the voices. Ours are the hands, the eyes, the smiles. We are loved by an unending love. Blessed are you, beloved one, who loves your people, Israel.
Okay, so what Rami seems to be doing with that is he goes down, he doesn't say God at once. It's an interpretive version of the prayer of love. But he put it out there and everybody loved it. And it seems to be saying, we feel this love. We feel the counseling. We feel the support, but we don't know it. We just know that it's there. It's unending. God loves us unconditionally. But we don't have to say God, 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 God. You can just say we are loved. Puts the verb in front of the noun. It says we are loved. How do you feel? I feel loved, right? Do I have to say God loves me or God loves you? I feel loved. Then he tells something else that's very radical. He says, ours are the arms, the fingers, the voices. Ours are the hands, the eyes, the smiles. The way, I don't want to, single anybody out. The way I see some of you interacting with your children. Yesterday we had a birthday party for Aviv, and it was just so beautiful to see Aviv so happy as Noam's kid. Now, while I'm at it, since we're at this prayer book, again, I'm not plugging any one movement, but what the Reconstructionist movement attempted to do, because of what I said before, is God. Okay, there's God, God, God. Every time the word Adonai appeared, because of the way Adonai can be interpreted, every time. So the most common one is, blessed are you, and when I grew up, was, oh Lord. Every time the word Yud He Vav He or Adonai appears, they will put in a different epithet or word phrase, eternal one. So that's very common. Then we come down here, Shema, bless the infinite. All right, so same word, Adonai, Adonai, infinite. Then we have, there's another eternal. The blessed are you, Almighty One. So you hear what I'm doing is I'm saying that they use, instead of using Lord, here, blessed are you, beloved one. That was in Rami's thing. I'm going fast. Eternal one, or hey, Micha Mocha. Micha Mocha is very important because Micha Mocha is praying for redemption at the sea. So the Holy One, everything, this capitals is all Adonai. Adonai Yimloch Leolam Vaed. And there's a V'ne'emar Kifad Adonai Ed Yaakov. There it is, the redeeming one. Blessed are you, the guardian. So again, I'm just trying to be goofy here, but some of you have nicknames for your beloved? Honey, babe, butterfly, I don't know. I've been in relationships too, so it's the same person, or sometimes you play games on their name. So that's how we feel about God. God is our beloved friend. One more prayer. I'm not going to do the whole thing. Do you remember on Friday night, we sing a prayer called Yedid Nefesh, beloved friend. Yedid is friend, friend of my soul. Dear beloved friend, take my disposition and blend it to your will. All right.
Hey, Grandma.
Conclude
Sorry, one more follow-up from
yeah,
Jamie.
go ahead. Yeah.
Since she's on the bad computer.
Uh,
A while back, we had a Catholic priest tell Jamie. I remember this guy. He was actually kind of cold.
cool or cold?
Cold. I didn't care for him much. He's kind of a mean man.
Oh gosh.
Said
Yeah.
that well, Jamie's background is a vet
Right.
assistant, vet tech, right? So he
Did you tell her
said that
that
animals.
she's going to hell or what? Oh.
No, it said that animals do not have souls, and it's a waste of human energy to care for animals. What's the view on this? And I promise I'll stop interrupting everyone else.
No. This is lovely. These are all exciting things because somebody asked Zalman that same question. My Rebbe, I talk about him a lot. I remember we'll do the movements, but Zalman was raised Hasidic, mystical, but then he began to teach it to non-Orthodox people like me. And his answer was, and I think about it when you think about your own animals, our animals do have the lower soul, the simple soul of desire, food, love. They appreciate, even wild animals, but particularly the animals that we have domesticated, like not just dogs and cats, but even bunnies and deer. And I mean, you see a lot of YouTube videos of somebody coming up to a cow and rubbing their head, and the cow goes, So that what Zalman said was, and people would get upset because they would say, oh, my cat died or my dog died. Well, think about it. That dog has been with you for 15, 20 years, not 20 years, but a lot of time. So Zalman said something interesting. They have their soul, and then we have the soul that we put into them, which is part of our soul, right? So they may not be at the same higher level. So that's an interesting answer. I believe that everything has, what is soul? It's energy. Now, I wanted to end on an up note, but I have one more sad story to tell, and then I'll see if I can come up with something to do. We got enough time. We'll do this when we cover this. The famous Holocaust survivor, Elie Wiesel. I have to do this because it's important. Christina was also talking about animals. Yeah, I know it's absurd. Everything has a soul. Even, grass has a level of energy. So if I interpret soul as energy, okay, so the story is that in the Wiesel was in Hungary, he and his father were sent to Auschwitz, Elie Wiesel, and he lived through that experience. His father died on the march when they weren't liberated, but they were closing the camp and were trying to, take all the people with them. And it was a horrible 3-day march. Wiesel survived, and he wrote the book to kind of as a catharsis. His mother's family, everybody else died, just him and his father, and then finally his father died in the camp or on the march. So he tells a horrible story about 3 people in the camp who were made an example of by the Nazis. This is in Poland, in Auschwitz, and the worst of the worst of the worst camps. And they either had stolen food or they had harbored some food. So they made an example of them. And so it was a boy and 2 men. So they hung them. Again, please forgive me. They hung them in front of everybody, and everybody was forced to watch. Well, when you die from hanging, it's because your weight breaks your neck. The boy would not die. He was hanging there for an hour, and they were made to watch. And so this poor boy is struggling, and the 2 men were already gone. And somebody says behind, maybe it's true, maybe it's just his memory, but Elie Wiesel says, somebody behind me cried out, "Where is God?" And then, sorry, somebody else answered, "That's God there, dying up there," which sounds a little bit Christian, the idea of suffering, but it really brings you into this idea that God is with us in the suffering. Now, maybe that's not what they meant, because they were hurting. But in a sense, God is with us. I say the divine is with us when we're happy, when we're sad. Oh, and now, okay, I planned this all out, but I forgot the other funny story. The other not so funny, not so sad story. Anybody remember the Frisco Kid with Gene Wilder? Not Blazing Saddles. All right. Frisco Kid is the story of, it's a fictional story. It's very cute, though. Gene Wilder, in his best Yiddish accent, is playing a rabbi sent from Europe to go to San Francisco, and he has all kinds of trials and tribulations. Some robbers steal his stuff, and he meets up with Harrison Ford playing a cowboy, and the cowboy and him team up to go through the West. And everywhere they go, they have adventures. And one of their adventures, after they've been robbed by these hoodlums, is they fall into the hands of the Native Americans. And it's very respectful. And so the medicine man, looks at the rabbi and says, "What are you? I'm a holy man." "And what is this thing you're carrying?" He's carrying a Torah. He says, "May I have Torah?" "No, you may not have Torah. It's our Torah." He says, "Will you die for Torah?" And again, it's very, very gripping scene. It says, so what, and he puts him on a stick, holding him on a stick over a fire, makes him walk across the fire. It's very moving. But then he says, you Jews, you have a God. Our God, we've been praying for rain. Why won't our God bring rain? And they're in the middle of the Great Plains. And he says, "Does your God make rain?" And Wilder's character, the rabbi, says, "No, our God doesn't make rain. God doesn't do that. That's not what God does. God," I love his accent. "God is with us when we're crazy, when we're hurting, when we're in pain, when we're happy, but God doesn't make rain. That's not his department." And then just at that moment, the storm starts and the rain comes down, and they're getting wet. And he looks around and he says, "Then again, sometimes he changes his mind just like that." So, all right. So, Taylor, you're laughing. Tell me what you think that story really means.
It seems like kind of points out that God really is just all around us. Just like the connectivity of things in the universe. At least I don't know if I'm off on that.
No, you're right on. I mean, there are no, well, I would say there's no wrong answers. If God told you to go and kill somebody, you would not do that. Or you thought you heard a voice. That's why you were doing before, Devin. There are crazy people who say things like that. God told me to go and shoot this person, but or God told me, I won't accept a God like that. All right. Or God told me to kill my son, on the altar, the Abraham story. But yeah, I think that story is really cool because what he's saying is God is energy, love, hope, faith, strength. But God doesn't sit there and say, you're going to get rain, you're not going to get rain. Our ancestors did believe that. That's what's interesting. In the time of, the biblical period, they literally would say, second paragraph of the Shema says, if you don't follow these laws, then the rain will stop and the land will dry up and you will fade away. And so they prayed. Nowadays, if I may, and Debbie's going to get angry, but maybe not, I say that maybe that paragraph could be interpreted differently. If we don't change the way we're working in the world, we may destroy our ability to have rain. So, but that's another discussion. Anyway, Rick, you got who wants to do the last comment or maybe a prayer? Anybody? Christina, the quiet one. Did you learn a lot from Taoism and paganism? Doesn't offend me. All right, she doesn't want to talk. Did I tell you guys just a little secret about Rabbi Moshe? I was so well, not wide, but I was also, looking for a relationship. And I was when I was in Massachusetts, I had a girlfriend who was a Wiccan. And I went with her to a retreat and was drumming and dancing. And I did the Jewish stuff. And all the other people, I said, hey, let's go. I brought a lulav and etrog. You remember the branches? And I said, we're going to go out in the woods. Anybody want to come? And all these Jews and Christians came out, and then we all shook it together. And so Judaism in some ways adapted some of the pagan rituals, but I will say it again, God is one, God is immutable, God is unknowable, but God is also knowable. Yes, there are some, yes, Christina writes, there's actually some overlap with Taoism. And I would say that too. I've studied Taoism, and I'll just end with that, not getting too personal. I think a lot of people today are seeking some sort of spiritual connection with Judaism that doesn't feel like patriarchy, right? Doesn't feel like you got to believe this, this, and this, and this, or you're an atheist. So go out and search your own journeys. This Friday night, I will lead services, and I'm going to be talking about that Torah portion, as a matter of fact, the Torah portion in which God tells Abraham, go lay your son on the altar. What does that do for us? So, okay, next week, just so you know, I will send it out in due time. We will start with biblical civ, and it's not going to be boring. We're going to do it. It's not going to be everything, but written Torah, oral Torah, and then rabbinic, and then we'll hopefully come to the Hellenistic period. It's up here in the chat. So I have it all on the syllabus, but I sent you a slightly revised one. So next week we'll stay online. Next week I'm going to send you, and we all did this last year. I think Devin and Jamie, you probably caught on the end. There's a film I want you to watch, and we'll watch it in sections. Watch it on your own. If you don't have a chance, we'll cover it in class too. But it's really good. All right. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Pray for our country, whatever that means to you. And pray for Israel. And take care of each other.
Okay. Good night, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. This has been recorded, so we'll get it to you all. All right. Take care. Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Oh,
Thank you.
wait, one more message here. Thank you. Thank you too. All right. Blessings.
Debbie, you still on?
Yes.
Did you get my message?
No, what, did you text me?
Yeah, here. Amber wants your phone number.
Oh, okay.